I'm Victoria, 32 years old, working as a digital communications specialist. I never thought my wedding at Sunnyvale Nursing Home planned, so my grandfather Emma could attend, would cause such drama. My mother and sister Amanda called it pathetic, embarrassing, and beneath our family's dignity. Their mockery turned to panic when our nursing home celebration went viral online. Now, the same women who ridiculed my special day are desperately begging me to remove the video. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button and stay for a story about standing your ground. My career in digital communications has always been about connecting people through authentic stories. I manage social media campaigns for small businesses, helping them find their unique voice in a crowded digital landscape. It's fulfilling work that allows me to witness the power of genuine human connection every day, something I've always valued thanks to my grandfather Emma. My grandfather has been my rock since childhood. When my parents divorced when I was 7, he was the one who made sure I still believed in love and family. At 92, he's the wisest, kindest person I know. 2 years ago, he suffered a severe stroke that left him partially paralyzed on his right side. The doctors recommended specialized care, which led to his residence at Sunnyvale Nursing Home. Despite the circumstances, his spirit remained unbroken, his mind sharp as ever, and his ability to give sound advice intact. I visit him 3 times a week without fail. During these visits, he would often ask about my love life, hoping to see me settled with someone who treats me right before he passes. That's how he came to know all about David before they even met. David entered my life 4 years ago at a mutual friend's housewarming party. He stood in the corner nursing a beer and looking slightly uncomfortable until our host introduced us. At 35, he's 3 years older than me, a software engineer with a calm demeanor that balances my occasionally anxious energy. He's thoughtful, kind, and possesses a quiet confidence that I find incredibly attractive. Our first date was at a small coffee shop where we ended up talking for 5 hours straight. Our relationship progressed naturally, and after 3 years together, he proposed at the public library, where we had our third date. It wasn't flashy or Instagram worthy, but it was perfectly us. When I called my grandfather to share the news, he cried with joy. My relationship with my mother Margaret and sister Amanda has always been complicated. My mother, now 58, remarried quickly after the divorce and seemed to start a new life where I was more of an afterthought. She's always been image conscious, concerned with appearances and social standing more than authentic happiness. Amanda, my 35-year-old sister from my mother's second marriage, inherited this preoccupation with status. She married a wealthy investment banker, lives in an expensive neighborhood, and rarely misses an opportunity to point out how I could be doing better in life. Whether it's my choice of career, my modest apartment, or my preference for comfort over fashion, she always has something critical to say. Over the years, I learned to limit my interactions with them to avoid their constant judgment. Holiday gatherings became exercises in restraint, with me deflecting questions about my career growth, and Amanda showcasing her latest luxury purchase. My mother would inevitably chime in with well-meaning but hurtful suggestions about how I could improve my appearance or prospects. When David proposed, I knew immediately that my grandfather needed to be at our wedding. His mobility issues made traveling to a conventional venue impossible. After discussing it with David, we made a decision that felt perfectly aligned with our values. We would bring the wedding to my grandfather by hosting it at Sunnyvale Nursing Home. The idea of celebrating our love in a place that had become my grandfather's home, surrounded by the staff who cared for him and the residents who had become his friends, felt right. It would be small, intimate, and incredibly meaningful. Little did I know that this decision would unleash a storm of criticism from my mother and sister that would ultimately change our relationship forever. I arranged a family dinner to share our wedding plans, hoping that the intimate setting might soften any initial resistance. David and I invited my mother's sister, brother-in-law, and a few close relatives to my apartment, where I prepared my grandfather's lasagna recipe as a subtle nod to his influence in my life. As we settled around the table after dinner, I took a deep breath and shared our decision. The reaction was immediate and jarring. A nursing home, my mother's voice rose an octave. Victoria, you cannot be serious. People get married in churches, hotels, or gardens, not in places that smell like medication and sadness. Amanda nearly spat out her wine. Oh my God, this is beyond ridiculous. What will people think? What will I tell my friends? That my sister's wedding had a buffet next to bedpans. Her husband Mark at least had the decency to look uncomfortable with her reaction, but he remained silent, studying the rim of his glass. It's not about the venue, David said calmly, placing his hand over mine on the table. It's about making sure Victoria's grandfather can be there. He's important to us. There are other ways, my mother insisted. We could arrange transportation, hire medical staff for the day. I'll even pay for it if that's the issue. It's not about money, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. Grandpa Emma can't travel comfortably even with assistance. His doctors have advised against it. And honestly, we want a small, meaningful ceremony rather than something elaborate. Amanda rolled her eyes. Small and meaningful is fine, but a nursing home, it's pathetic. You'll be exchanging vows with the soundtrack of heart monitors and old people coughing. Each word felt like a slap. I had anticipated some resistance, but not this level of disdain. The residents there are people with rich lives and stories, I countered, and they've become Grandpa's community. Including them feels right to us. To you, maybe, my mother set her lips tight. But have you considered how this reflects on the family? What will the relatives think? What about David's family? David's parents are supportive, I said. They understand why this matters to us. My cousin Rachel, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. I think it's actually really sweet. It shows what you value. Amanda shot her a look that could freeze fire. What she values is attention. This is just another of Victoria's attempts to be different for the sake of being different. The conversation deteriorated from there. My mother and sister took turns listing all the reasons why my wedding venue was inappropriate, embarrassing, and selfish. According to them, I was prioritizing one relative over everyone else's comfort, choosing shock value over tradition, and setting myself up for a lifetime of regret. David maintained his composure better than I did. When he saw tears forming in my eyes, he suggested we end the evening firmly stating that our decision was made, and we were simply informing them, not seeking permission. As guests were leaving, my mother pulled me aside. Think about this carefully, Victoria. A wedding should be beautiful, something you look back on with joy, not something you have to explain or apologize for the rest of your life. The next day, I visited my grandfather. The moment I told him about our plans, his eyes filled with tears. You would do that? Have your special day here because of an old man like me? His weathered hand trembled as he reached for mine. Not because of you, Grandpa. With you. There's no one I want there more. But what about a beautiful venue? Every girl dreams of that. My dream is having the people I love most present, especially you. The rest is just details. His smile was worth 1,000 elaborate wedding venues. Your grandmother would have been so proud of the woman you've become, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Despite my grandfather's joy, doubt began to creep in. That evening, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from relatives who had heard the news from my mother and sister. Apparently, they had been busy spreading their version of our wedding plans, describing it as a depressing affair that would make guests uncomfortable. Just got a strange call from Aunt Patricia, David said, looking up from his phone. She wanted to know if we were okay financially since we're having the wedding at a nursing home. The realization that my mother and sister were actively undermining our plans hurt more than their initial reaction. They weren't just expressing disapproval, they were trying to sabotage our day by turning others against us. That night, I lay awake questioning our decision. Maybe there was a compromise we hadn't considered. Maybe tradition mattered more than I wanted to admit. But every time I pictured my grandfather's face when I told him I knew we were making the right choice for us. What I didn't know then was how this choice would eventually expose the true nature of my family relationships to the world. The weeks following our announcement became increasingly difficult as my mother and sister escalated their campaign against our wedding plans. Amanda began sending me links to wedding venues every day, each message more passive-aggressive than the last. Just thought you might want to see what a real wedding looks like. One read attached to photos of a beachfront ceremony. Another simply stated, "Not too late to change your mind and avoid being the laughingstock of the family." My mother took a different approach, calling me daily with concerns about how other guests would perceive the event. "Your Uncle Robert has allergies to the cleaning products they use in those places," she claimed one day. "Your cousin's children will be frightened by all the old people," she insisted the next. Each conversation ended the same way, with her declaring that she might not attend if we went through with our plans, and that she couldn't in good conscience encourage others to come either. The pressure intensified when Amanda created a family group chat explicitly excluding David and me. I only learned about it when my cousin Rachel forwarded me some of the messages where Amanda and my mother were characterizing our nursing home wedding as a cry for attention and disrespectful to the institution of marriage. "Don't worry about them," David said, finding me staring at the screenshots, tears streaming down my face. "Anyone who matters will understand." But the weight of their disapproval was crushing. These were the people who were supposed to support me unconditionally. Instead, they were treating my wedding like an embarrassment that needed to be contained. Through all this, the staff at Sunnyvale Nursing Home couldn't have been more different. When we approached the administration about our idea, the director, Mrs. Patel, was immediately enthusiastic. "In the 15 years I've worked here, we've hosted memorial services and birthday celebrations, but never a wedding," she told us, smiling broadly. "What a wonderful way to bring joy to our residents." She introduced us to their events coordinator, Miguel, who helped us navigate the logistics of transforming their community room into a wedding venue. He offered creative solutions for everything from seating arrangements to photography angles that would capture the beauty of the moment while respecting the privacy of residents who didn't wish to be featured. Through these planning sessions, I met Lauren, a nurse who had been caring for my grandfather since his arrival. She had a gift for seeing the person behind the patient, and she immediately understood what we were trying to do. "Your grandfather talks about you constantly," she told me as we discussed flower arrangements. "Having this wedding here will mean the world to him and lift the spirits of everyone else too." My best friends Jessica and Thomas became my lifelines through this period. While Jessica helped with practical wedding details, Thomas used his experience as a therapist to help me navigate the emotional minefield of family conflict. "What your mother and sister are doing says more about their insecurities than about your choices," he reminded me over coffee one afternoon. "They've invested so much in appearing a certain way that they can't recognize authenticity when they see it." Despite the support network, the situation grew worse when I discovered that my mother had been spreading misinformation about the nursing home itself. At a family gathering, I couldn't attend due to work. She had apparently described Sunnyvale as a depressing place that smells like death, despite never having visited. As a result, several cousins and friends sent apologetic messages declining our invitation, citing various excuses that all seemed suspiciously similar. "I'm just not comfortable in those environments," wrote one cousin who worked as a hospital administrator. "The kids might be too disruptive for the elderly residents," claimed another, though we had specifically mentioned that children were welcome. Each rejection stung not because I needed a big audience, but because I recognized the influence my mother and sister had wielded. They had successfully painted our sincere choice as something shameful, and people I loved had believed them without question. One evening, after a particularly difficult phone call with my mother that ended with her threatening to boycott the wedding entirely, I broke down in David's arms. "Maybe we should just give in," I sobbed. "Have a normal wedding somewhere else and visit Grandpa afterward. It would be easier." David held me tight but shook his head. "Easier isn't always right. This wedding is about us and our values. If we cave now, we'll be letting them dictate our choices for the rest of our lives." His words resonated with something my grandfather had told me years ago. "The right path isn't always the smooth one, Victoria, but the view from the top is worth the climb." As my tears subsided, I made a decision. I wouldn't let my mother and sister's narrow definition of what was acceptable determine one of the most significant days of my life. If they couldn't support me, I would move forward without them. What I didn't realize then was that this stance would eventually force them to confront the consequences of their actions in a way none of us could have anticipated. With renewed determination, I threw myself into making our nursing home wedding not just meaningful, but beautiful. If my mother and sister expected a depressing makeshift event, I was going to prove them wrong. My first step was expanding my support system beyond David, Jessica, and Thomas. I joined an online forum for unconventional weddings and shared our story. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of people recounted similar experiences of family resistance to their wedding choices, whether due to venue cultural traditions or religious differences. Many had gone through with their plans anyway, and were grateful they had stood their ground. "My grandma was in hospice when we got married," wrote one woman. "We brought the ceremony to her room with just 5 people present. She died 3 days later, but the photos of her beaming at us in my wedding dress are priceless now." These stories strengthened my resolve. I created a private social media group for our wedding guests, where I could share the real reasons behind our venue choice and provide updates about our plans. This direct line of communication helped counteract some of the misinformation my mother and sister had spread. With David's encouragement, I refocused on what truly mattered, creating a day that reflected our love and values, and ensuring my grandfather could fully participate in the celebration. We scheduled several planning visits to Sunnyvale, each one reinforcing that we had made the right decision. The community room had large windows overlooking a well-maintained garden, with natural light that would be perfect for photographs. The space could comfortably accommodate our 40 guests, and the facility had a small kitchen where our caterers could set up. During one visit, Mrs. Patel introduced us to Mr. Rivera, the resident handyman, who had been quietly crafting a surprise for us, a beautiful wooden arch under which we could exchange our vows. He had carved delicate floral patterns into the wood, finishing it with a warm stain that glowed in the sunlight. My late wife and I were married 56 years. He told us his hand's still strong despite his 80 years. "When I heard about your wedding, I wanted to contribute something. Every marriage needs a strong foundation." I was moved to tears by his generosity, and it was just the beginning. As word spread through the nursing home about our wedding, other residents began offering their own contributions. Mrs. Alvarez, a former florist, volunteered to help arrange the flowers. Mr. Stevens, who had been a DJ in his younger years, offered to create a playlist of classic love songs. Most touching was the offer from Mrs. Franklin, an 89-year-old former concert pianist whose arthritis had not diminished her passion for music. "I can still play the wedding march," she assured us, demonstrating on the facility's slightly out-of-tune upright piano. Her fingers, though bent with age, moved across the keys with surprising grace. "And any other songs you might like for the ceremony." These connections transformed what had begun as a practical solution for including my grandfather into something far more meaningful, a true community celebration that bridged generations and honored life's continuing journey. Lauren, my grandfather's nurse, became particularly invested in our plans. During her breaks, she would sit with me and share ideas based on her understanding of what would work well in the space and what would bring joy to the residents who would be attending. "Many of our residents rarely have visitors," she explained. "Your wedding will be the highlight of their year. You have no idea how much this means to them." One afternoon, I brought my wedding dress to show my grandfather. His room was at the end of a quiet hallway, decorated with family photos and his collection of vintage baseball cards. As I slipped into the bathroom to change, Lauren helped him into his best sweater and combed his hair. When I emerged in my simple A-line dress with lace detailing his eyes filled with tears, "You look just like your grandmother on our wedding day," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She would be so proud of the woman you've become." Lauren discreetly took a photo of us together, my grandfather in his armchair, and me kneeling beside him in my dress, his hand resting on mine. That image would later become one of my most treasured possessions, though I didn't know then how significant it would become. As our wedding day approached, the contrast between the warmth of the nursing home community and the cold rejection from my own family grew starker. My mother had made good on her threat, informing me via text message that she would not attend such a spectacle. Amanda went further, sending a lengthy email detailing all the ways I was embarrassing the family and suggesting I needed therapy for my attention-seeking behavior. Their words hurt, but they no longer held the power to derail our plans. With every act of kindness from the Sunnyvale community, my conviction grew stronger that we were creating something authentic and meaningful, regardless of whether it met others' expectations of what a wedding should be. What I couldn't have known then was that this steadfast commitment to our values would soon be vindicated in ways I never could have imagined. The morning of our wedding arrived with unseasonably perfect weather sunshine streaming through the windows of the small guest room at Sunnyvale where I was getting ready. Jessica helped with my makeup, while Thomas arranged my simple bouquet of wildflowers, carefully chosen to match the garden visible through the community room windows. "Any word from your mom or sister?" Jessica asked carefully as she pinned my hair. "Nothing since the text yesterday," I replied. My mother's final message had been brief but cutting. "It's not too late to move this somewhere appropriate. Last chance." I had responded with equal brevity. "We're looking forward to celebrating with those who support our choice. You're still welcome if you change your mind." There had been no reply, and I had made peace with their absence. The day would be beautiful with or without them. At that moment, there was a sharp knock on the door. Thomas opened it to reveal Lauren looking uncharacteristically flustered. "Your mother and sister are here," she said quickly. "They're in the lobby, and they're causing a bit of a scene." My stomach dropped. What kind of scene? "They're complaining about everything, the parking, the entrance, the smell." Lauren twisted her hands. "Your mother asked to speak with the facility director about health code violations she's apparently noticed in the 5 minutes she's been here." I closed my eyes briefly. I should have known they wouldn't just stay away. Jessica squeezed my shoulder. "You don't have to see them. This is your day." But I knew ignoring them would only escalate the situation. "I'll talk to them. Better to deal with this now than have them interrupt the ceremony." I followed Lauren to the small reception area where my mother and Amanda stood like visitors from another world. My mother wore an expensive suit that seemed aggressively formal for the occasion, while Amanda had chosen a dress that would have been appropriate for a gala, complete with statement jewelry that caught the light with every movement. "Victoria," my mother said, her voice carrying across the room. "We need to talk. Privately." I gestured to a small consultation room off the main lobby, determined to contain whatever confrontation was coming. Once inside, with the door firmly shut, my mother didn't waste time. "This place is exactly as depressing as I imagined," she began. "The lighting is harsh, it smells institutional, and I saw at least 2 residents who look like they might not make it through your ceremony." "Those people have names," I said quietly, "and they've been kinder about our wedding than my own family." Amanda scoffed. "Kindness? Is that what you're prioritizing over dignity, over how this makes us look? How it makes you look?" I repeated, genuinely baffled. "This isn't about you. Everything you do reflects on this family," my mother insisted. "And right now you're making us look like we raised a daughter with no understanding of propriety or tradition." "I understand them fine," I countered. "I just don't worship them at the expense of what actually matters." "And what matters is apparently making some kind of statement," Amanda said, rolling her eyes. "Always the rebel, always needing to be different." Jessica, who had followed us and was standing by the door, pulled out her phone and subtly positioned it toward us. I realized she was recording, but chose not to draw attention to it. "The only statement I'm making is that I love my grandfather and want him at my wedding," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "If that's rebellious in your world, so be it." My mother's expression hardened. "We've come to give you one last chance to reconsider. We can still move this. I've put the country club on standby. They had a cancellation and can accommodate us this evening." The audacity was breathtaking. "The ceremony starts in less than an hour. People are already arriving." "So they can drive to the new location. It's only 20 minutes away." I looked from my mother to my sister, suddenly seeing with perfect clarity how little they understood me, how little they had ever tried to. "I'm getting married here," I said firmly. "With or without your blessing. You're welcome to stay if you can be supportive. but I won't have you ruining this day with your judgment and criticism." Amanda laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. "Ruining it? Trust me, this sad little setup is ruined all on its own. I can't wait to show my friends pictures of this disaster. They won't believe it." That was when I realized their true intention in coming. They weren't here to support me or even to make a last-ditch effort to change my mind. They were here to document what they saw as my humiliation, to gather evidence for their narrative about my poor judgment. "I think you should leave," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "If we leave, we're not coming back," my mother warned. "This is your last chance to be reasonable." "Then I guess this is goodbye for today." I moved toward the door, signaling that the conversation was over. As they brushed past me, Amanda muttered, "This pathetic spectacle will follow you forever. I hope your nursing home audience is worth it." Once they were gone, I collapsed into a chair, shaking with anger and hurt. Jessica stopped her recording and knelt beside me. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, "but you handled that beautifully." Thomas appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay? David's asking for you." I took a deep breath and stood up. "Tell him it's all fine. The day just got a lot better, actually." And strangely it had. Their appearance and subsequent departure felt like the lancing of a wound. The toxic expectation that I might still cave to their demands was gone, replaced by a liberating certainty that I was following my heart. As I walked back to finish getting ready, Lauren fell into step beside me. "Your grandfather is ready," she said with a gentle smile. "He looks so handsome in his suit, and he can't stop telling everyone how proud he is of you." That was all that mattered now. I had chosen love and authenticity over obligation and appearance. In less than an hour, I would marry the man who supported that choice, without question, with the blessing of the person who had always seen and valued the real me. What I didn't know then was that this moment of clarity would be captured and shared in ways that would change everything. By the time I walked into the transformed community room on my grandfather's arm, I had left the confrontation with my mother and sister behind. What greeted me took my breath away. The space had been transformed beyond my wildest expectations. Soft, white fabric draped from the ceiling, creating the illusion of a canopy. Fairy lights twinkled among the folds, casting a warm glow that softened the institutional lighting. Mr. Rivera's handcrafted arch stood at the front, adorned with wildflowers and greenery that echoed my bouquet. Rows of chairs lined a central aisle covered with scattered rose petals. Most touching were the residents of Sunnyvale, dressed in their finest clothes, beaming as though this was a celebration they had been looking forward to for months. Some sat in wheelchairs, others used walkers or canes, but all had made an effort to be present for this moment. They were interspersed with our invited guests, creating a beautiful blend of ages and backgrounds, united by their support for our union. David waited at the front beside the celebrant, his face lighting up as our eyes met across the room. Behind him stood Thomas and his brother as groomsmen. Jessica and my friend Rachel waited on the other side, as my bridesmaids both looking radiant in the simple blue dresses they had chosen. Mrs. Franklin began playing a gentle rendition of Canon in D on the piano as my grandfather and I started our slow procession. His mobility was limited, so we had practiced moving at a pace comfortable for him. The moment felt more meaningful for its deliberate slowness, allowing me to fully absorb the faces of those who had chosen to witness our commitment. About halfway down the aisle, I noticed movement near the back of the room. My mother and sister had returned and were standing just inside the entrance. Amanda had her phone raised, clearly recording. Their expressions were a mix of disbelief and thinly veiled disdain as they surveyed the scene. For a moment I faltered, but my grandfather's gentle squeeze on my arm brought me back to the present. "Don't mind them," he whispered. "This is your moment." He was right. I refocused on David's warm smile and continued forward. The ceremony itself was everything we had hoped for. The celebrant welcomed everyone and spoke beautifully about love that transcends conventional expectations. My grandfather, seated in a chair of honor beside me, fulfilled his special role by presenting our rings on a small velvet cushion Lauren had helped him prepare. Before we exchanged vows, he surprised us by slowly standing with Lauren's assistance to share a few words. His voice, though soft, carried clearly through the quiet room. Love isn't about grand gestures or perfect settings, he said, his eyes moving between David and me. It's about choosing each other every day, especially when it's difficult. It's about seeing the real person behind the facade we all wear and cherishing what you find there. He paused, his eyes misting. Victoria and David, may you always see each other as clearly as you do today. There wasn't a dry eye in the room as he finished, except perhaps for my mother and sister, who remained stonily observant from the back. David and I exchanged simple, heartfelt vows we had written ourselves. As we sealed our commitment with a kiss, the residents of Sunnyvale erupted in applause that seemed to contain decades of accumulated wisdom about what makes a marriage endure. The reception that followed was small but joyful. Tables had been set up around the perimeter of the room, simply decorated with wildflower centerpieces. A local caterer served a buffet meal that included options suitable for the varying dietary needs of the residents. Mrs. Franklin and two other musically inclined residents formed an impromptu band playing gentle classics that had couples of all ages swaying together. My mother and sister remained for the ceremony, but disappeared before the reception began. I caught glimpses of Amanda filming throughout her expression, making it clear that she was gathering material to mock later, rather than to preserve precious memories. What neither of them noticed was Lauren quietly capturing her own footage of the day. Unlike Amanda's selectively critical eye, Lauren's camera found moments of genuine beauty and connection. My grandfather's face as he watched us dance, elderly couples holding hands as they reminisced about their own weddings. David kneeling beside a resident's wheelchair to hear a story about marriage advice. "Do you mind if I share some of these on our facility social media?" Lauren asked as the celebration wound down. "With your permission, of course. I think they showcase what makes Sunnyvale special and might help other families see nursing homes differently." "Of course," I agreed readily. "Share whatever you like. This day has been more beautiful than I ever imagined, and it's largely thanks to the Sunnyvale community." As the evening concluded, my grandfather pulled me close for a final embrace. "Thank you," he whispered. "This old man couldn't have asked for a more perfect day." David and I had decided to postpone our honeymoon until summer, opting instead to spend the night at a charming bed and breakfast nearby. As we left Sunnyvale hand in hand, showered with well wishes and biodegradable confetti, I felt completely at peace with our choice. We had created a celebration that reflected our values and prioritized what truly mattered to us. What I couldn't have anticipated was how quickly and dramatically those quiet, authentic choices would capture the public imagination in the days to come. 3 days after our wedding, I was at work when my phone began buzzing incessantly with notifications. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was just friends and family sharing wedding photos. But when Jessica called, her voice pitched with excitement, I knew something unusual was happening. "Have you seen what's going on?" she asked without preamble. "Lauren's video of your wedding has gone viral. It's everywhere." I quickly opened my social media accounts to find hundreds of notifications. Lauren had compiled a beautiful 3-minute video of our nursing home wedding set to Mrs. Franklin's piano rendition of "Can't Help Falling in Love." She had posted it on the Sunnyvale Nursing Home's accounts with a simple caption, "Love knows no bounds, a beautiful wedding in our community that reminded us all what truly matters." The video had been shared thousands of times overnight. It captured everything beautiful about the day: the carefully decorated community room, the joy on the residents' faces, my grandfather's emotional speech, and the palpable love between David and me. Comments poured in from around the world, many from people who had never considered a nursing home as a wedding venue, but were moved by the authenticity and meaning behind our choice. "This made me cry," wrote one commenter. "Such a beautiful reminder that weddings should be about love and family, not just pretty pictures for Instagram." "My grandmother is in a nursing home, and I never considered she could be part of my wedding like this," wrote another. "Thank you for the inspiration." By that afternoon, the video had been picked up by several major social media accounts focused on weddings and heartwarming stories. My phone rang with a call from a producer at a national morning show, asking if David and I would be interested in an interview about our unconventional but touching wedding venue choice. As I was processing this unexpected attention, Jessica sent me another link, this one to her own social media post. I thought people should see the other side of this story, her message read. Jessica had posted the recording she made of my mother and sister's confrontation with me, before the wedding, editing it to blur their faces, but leaving their words intact. Her caption was simple but damning. Before this beautiful wedding went viral, the bride had to stand up to family members who called her choice pathetic and a spectacle. Sometimes the most meaningful choices require the most courage. My stomach dropped. While I appreciated Jessica's intention to show the full story, I hadn't expected our family conflict to become public alongside our celebration. Her post was already gaining traction with comments expressing outrage at my mother and sister's behavior. Before I could fully process this development, my phone rang again. It was Amanda, and she was hysterical. "What have you done?" she shrieked without greeting. "People are recognizing me from that video your friend posted. My colleagues are asking if that was me. Do you have any idea how this makes me look?" "I didn't ask Jessica to post that," I said truthfully. "But those were your words, Amanda. You and Mom chose to say those things." "You need to get both videos taken down immediately," she demanded. "This is damaging my reputation. My friends are texting me asking if that's really how I behaved. My boss saw it." "I can talk to Jessica about her post," I offered. "But Lauren's video of the wedding itself isn't something I would want removed. It's bringing joy to people and might even change perceptions about nursing homes." "I don't care about changing perceptions. I care about the fact that I'm being portrayed as some kind of villain." Shortly after, my mother called with similar demands. Her voice was tight with controlled anger. "Victoria, this has gone too far. You need to contain the situation immediately." "What exactly would you like me to do?" I asked calmly. "Contact that nurse and tell her to remove the video. Tell your friend to take down that recording. Issue a statement that it was all a misunderstanding." She spoke rapidly as though enumerating a crisis management plan. "Say that we were just concerned about proper wedding traditions." "But that wouldn't be true," I said. "You weren't concerned about traditions. You were concerned about appearances. And you were cruel about it." "I have been getting calls all day," she continued, ignoring my response. "People I respect, people I work with, asking if that's my daughter's wedding being shared everywhere, and if that's me in the other video. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" The irony wasn't lost on me. "Actually, I do. I know exactly how it feels to have family members publicly express shame about your choices." There was a beat of silence before she spoke again, her voice colder. "Victoria, I'm not asking. I'm telling you to fix this. If you ever want a relationship with me going forward, you will get those videos removed today." After we hung up, I sat at my desk staring blankly at my computer screen. The tables had turned so dramatically it was almost dizzying. My mother and sister, who had been so concerned about how my wedding would reflect on them, were now facing public scrutiny for their behavior. Throughout the day, the situation intensified. Lauren's wedding video reached millions of views across platforms. Several wedding publications requested interviews, and a popular wedding planning website asked if they could feature our story in an article about meaningful venue choices. Meanwhile, Jessica's recording continued spreading despite her agreement to my request to remove it from her own accounts. It had already been downloaded and reshared by others, often with harsh commentary about toxic family dynamics. By evening, David and I had to make a decision about how to handle the situation. The requests for interviews were multiplying, and my mother and sister were growing increasingly desperate in their demands that we somehow make it all disappear. "What do you want to do?" David asked as we sat on our couch, my phone still buzzing with notifications. "We could ignore it all and let it blow over, or we could use this platform to share what the day really meant to us." I thought about my grandfather, who had called earlier confused but pleased by all the attention. "People keep telling me they saw me on the computer," he had said with wonder in his voice. "They say I made them cry happy tears." I think we share our truth, I decided. Not to punish my mother and sister, but to honor what the day was really about. Maybe it will help someone else stand firm in their own meaningful choices. What I didn't realize then was that this decision would not only impact others, but would ultimately create space for healing in my own family, in ways I never could have imagined. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. David and I gave several interviews focusing on the positive aspects of our wedding choice, rather than the family conflict. We spoke about the importance of inclusivity, the beauty of intergenerational celebrations, and how nursing homes can be places of joy and community, not just care and confinement. Our story struck a chord with thousands of people. Emails flooded in from others sharing similar experiences of family resistance to unconventional choices, along with stories of weddings held in hospitals, hospice centers, and other care facilities, to include loved ones who couldn't travel. Sunnyvale Nursing Home received so many inquiries about events that they began developing official guidelines for hosting celebrations. Mrs. Patel called to tell me they had already booked 2 more weddings and a vow renewal ceremony for the coming months. My grandfather became something of a celebrity among the residents and staff. People keep bringing me cookies and asking for marriage advice. He told me during one of my visits, his eyes twinkling with amusement. I'm not sure my one successful marriage qualifies me as an expert, but I'm enjoying the cookies. Cards and small gifts arrived for him from strangers touched by his role in our wedding. One woman sent a handmade quilt with a note explaining that her own father had died before he could attend her wedding, and how moved she was by our effort to include my grandfather. Throughout all this attention, my mother and sister remained conspicuously silent. Their initial demands for retraction had given way to complete withdrawal. Through family friends, I heard that my mother had taken a sudden personal leave from her position at a corporate law firm, while Amanda had made her social media accounts private and was avoiding social gatherings. After almost 3 weeks, my mother finally reached out via a brief text message. We need to talk. In person. Just the 3 of us. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. When I arrived, I was shocked by their appearance. My always impeccably groomed mother looked tired, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Amanda, who typically wouldn't be caught dead without full makeup and designer clothes, wore jeans and a plain sweater, her face bare. Thank you for coming. My mother began, her voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. We have a lot to discuss. I'm listening, I said, keeping my expression neutral. First, we want to know if you'll publicly clarify that we're not the monsters we've been made out to be, Amanda said, cutting to the chase. People are treating us like we're villains in some fairy tale. I haven't characterized you that way in any interview, I pointed out. I've barely mentioned the family disagreement at all. But you haven't defended us either, my mother countered. You could release a statement saying it was a misunderstanding, that we were just concerned about tradition. I studied them both. Is that really why you opposed my wedding venue, because of tradition? A heavy silence fell over our table. Finally, my mother sighed. No, it wasn't about tradition. Then what was it about? Image, she admitted quietly. Status, what people would think. And do those things still seem as important now? Amanda stared into her untouched coffee. My supervisor pulled me aside last week. She said the behavior captured in that video doesn't align with our company's values. I'm on probation now with mandatory sensitivity training. I hadn't expected that. I'm sorry about your job, Amanda. That wasn't my intention. I know, she conceded, but maybe it was deserved. My mother reached across the table, something hesitant in the gesture. Victoria, this situation has forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself and how I've treated you. I've spent so many years worrying about appearances that I lost sight of what actually matters. And what matters? I asked, not ready to accept this apparent change of heart without testing its depth. Connection, authenticity, the courage to live according to your own values rather than others' expectations. She paused, visibly struggling. All things you demonstrated with your wedding choices, and that I failed to see. Mom, why has image always been so important to you? I've never understood it. She was quiet for a long moment. After your father left, I felt like a failure. I thought if I could at least appear successful and put together, maybe no one would notice how broken I felt inside. That mindset became a habit, then a value system. I passed it on to Amanda, and we both tried to force it on you. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. For the first time, I glimpsed the wounded person behind my mother's perfect facade, and it created a small opening for compassion. "I won't issue a statement that isn't true," I said firmly. "But I'm willing to post something acknowledging that people are complex, that one recorded moment doesn't define a person's entire character, and that our family is working through our differences privately." Relief washed over their faces. It wasn't everything they wanted, but it was something. "And in return," I continued, "I'd like you both to visit Grandpa at Sunnyvale. Not for show, not for social media, but to genuinely connect with him and see the community that made our wedding so special." They exchanged glances before my mother nodded. "We can do that." As we prepared to leave, Amanda hesitated. "Your wedding really was beautiful." She admitted the words clearly difficult for her. "Different from what I would choose, but beautiful in its own way." It wasn't a full reconciliation. Years of judgment and criticism couldn't be erased in one conversation. But it was a beginning, a crack in the wall of appearances that had separated us for so long. What followed was a gradual, often awkward process of rebuilding. My mother and sister did visit my grandfather initially out of obligation to our agreement, but eventually with increasing genuineness. He welcomed them with the same warmth he showed everyone, either forgiving or forgetting their previous absence from his life. 6 months after our wedding, my grandfather passed away peacefully in his sleep. The funeral was held at Sunnyvale, attended by many of the same people who had witnessed our wedding. My mother and sister stood beside me as we celebrated his long, well-lived life. In the year since our wedding, much has changed. David and I have established a small foundation in my grandfather's name that funds activities and celebrations at nursing homes in our area. The viral attention to our wedding helped us raise initial donations, and we've already supported several events that bring joy to residents and help them maintain connections with the broader community. My relationship with my mother and sister remains a work in progress. There are still moments of tension when old patterns emerge, but there's also a new willingness to acknowledge when appearances are taking precedence over authenticity. Just last week, we celebrated our first wedding anniversary with a small gathering at Sunnyvale. Mrs. Franklin played the piano. Mr. Rivera proudly showed off the arch he had created that now stands permanently in the garden. And Lauren shared updates on how our story had inspired other families to include nursing home residents in significant celebrations. As I watched my mother helping Mrs. Alvarez arrange flowers for the tables, I reflected on the unexpected journey our wedding had prompted. What began as a practical solution to include my grandfather had become a catalyst for profound change, not just in public perceptions of nursing homes, but in our family's understanding of what truly matters. In the end, the most valuable gift from our unconventional wedding wasn't the viral attention, or even the foundation we established. It was the lesson that authentic choices, however they might appear to others, create the foundation for a life of meaning and connection. If you're facing pressure to conform to others' expectations about your wedding or any significant life choice, remember that courage to follow your heart often reveals who truly supports you and sometimes creates unexpected opportunities for growth and healing. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever made an unconventional choice that others criticized, but that proved meaningful in the end? How did you find the strength to stand your ground? Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to make choices based on love rather than appearance. Thank you for listening to my journey.